said it the way you'd remind someone to pick up milk on the way home. Casual. Flat. Like it didn't carry any weight at all. The kids are coming Sunday. My brother too. I'd prefer if you stayed upstairs while everyone's here. I was standing in the kitchen holding a bag of groceries I'd just brought in from the car. I set them down on the counter slowly. I looked at her. I'm sorry. It's just. Things have been tense. I don't want any awkwardness at the table. It's my house, I said. I know. I'm just asking. She turned back to the stove like the conversation was already over. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. My wife and I had been married for 31 years at that point. 31 years. I had built a life with this woman. We raised 2 kids in that house. I coached Little League on Saturday mornings. I fixed the gutters every fall. I drove her mother to chemotherapy appointments 3 times a week for 8 months and never once complained. Not once. So when she stood at that stove and told me, calm as weather, that she'd prefer I stay upstairs while her family ate at the table I'd paid for, in the house I'd worked 30 years to own outright, I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just went quiet in a way I hadn't been quiet in a long time. Her name was Miriam, my wife. We met when I was 28 at a church potluck of all places, in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. She had a laugh that could fill a room and opinions about everything, and I loved that about her. Or I had. I'm not entirely sure when the woman who laughed like that became the woman standing at that stove. Her brother's name was Clint. He was 2 years younger than her, had been divorced twice, and had an opinion about everything I did wrong in my marriage, most of which he communicated not directly to me, but through Miriam, who then delivered it with this practiced neutrality, like she was just passing along information. No editorializing, just the message. Clint thinks you were too harsh with the grandkids last Thanksgiving. Clint says you shouldn't have sold the old truck without talking it over. Clint feels like you don't make enough of an effort. I had tried for years to find common ground with this man. We had watched football together. I had helped him move furniture into 3 different apartments. I had lent him money twice, over $1,000 total, that I never saw again and never asked about. I had extended every olive branch I had. But there was something about me that he had decided, years ago, did not sit right with him. And whatever that something was, Miriam had slowly, quietly come to agree with him. That Sunday came around. I had already decided by Friday night that I wasn't going to hide upstairs. I'm 63 years old. I am not a child who gets sent to his room. But I also wasn't going to make a scene. That's not who I am. I came downstairs around noon and started making coffee. Miriam was in the kitchen cutting vegetables. She looked up when she heard me, and there was something in her face. Not surprise exactly, more like calculation. She was deciding how to handle this. I thought you were going to give us some space today, she said. I live here, I said, quietly, not angry, just factual. She didn't say anything else. She went back to her vegetables. Clint arrived first, around 12:30. He walked in without knocking, he never knocked. And when he saw me sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, he stopped for just a half second. His jaw tightened slightly. Then he smiled and said hello and went to find Miriam. Our daughter and her husband arrived at 1. Our son came at 1:30 with his girlfriend. The grandkids came in loud and fast the way kids do. And for a little while the house felt like it used to feel, full and warm and real. We sat down at the table. All of us. I sat at the head of the table, where I always sat. Miriam looked at Clint. Clint looked at his plate. I unfolded my napkin and asked my grandson what he'd been learning in school. We ate. It wasn't comfortable. But I was there. I was at my table in my house. That mattered to me. After dinner, after the kids had gone off to play and the dishes were mostly cleared, Clint asked if he could speak with me privately. We went out to the back porch. It was cold for October, that gray Ohio cold that settles in your bones. "I want to talk to you about the house," he said. I waited. "Miriam is worried about the future, about what happens if something happens to you." "I'm 63, I said. "I'm healthy." "Things happen," he said. "She just wants to make sure she's protected." "She's on the deed," I said. "She's always been on the deed. She'd inherit everything." He nodded slowly, like I'd just said something that only partially satisfied him. "Have you updated your estate documents recently?" I told him we had an attorney who handled all of that. I told him everything was in order. I told him I didn't understand what concern he had that wasn't already addressed. He shrugged, smiled, said he was just checking, said he just cared about his sister. I went back inside and didn't think much more about it. That was my mistake. The call came on a Thursday, 11 days later. It was from my bank, not a person at first, one of those automated fraud alerts. It said there had been unusual activity on my account and asked me to press 1 to speak with the fraud department. I pressed 1. The woman who came on the line was professional and methodical. She asked me to verify my identity. She asked me to confirm several recent transactions. One of them was a wire transfer of $14,000 to an account I didn't recognize, initiated 2 days prior. I had not made that wire transfer. I told her that. She asked me a few more questions. Had I recently shared my account login with anyone? Had I received any calls asking for my information? Had I noticed any mail going missing? Mail going missing. I thought about that. We have a mailbox at the end of the driveway. I had noticed a few times over the past few weeks that it was already empty when I went to check it in the afternoon. I had assumed Miriam was getting it. She sometimes worked from home. The fraud specialist put a hold on the account and transferred me to their investigations team. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone. I learned that someone had called the bank 8 days earlier, 3 days before Clint came over for dinner, and had successfully completed a security verification using my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, and the last 4 of my card. All information that would appear on documents, documents that came in the mail, documents like an annual investment statement, like a Medicare summary notice, like a property tax bill. Mail that someone had been intercepting. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a long time after those calls ended. I didn't go back inside right away. I needed to think clearly, and I couldn't think clearly in that house just then. I called my attorney. He wasn't available, but I left a detailed voicemail. I called my financial advisor. I went through every account I had, checking, savings, the investment account I'd opened when I retired from the plant 3 years ago. I changed every password. I set up 2-factor authentication on everything. I called the Social Security Administration and flagged my number. Then I drove to the local branch of my bank in person and sat down with the branch manager. She was thorough and kind. She confirmed that the wire transfer had been reversed. They'd caught it in time. She told me this kind of thing was more common than most people realized. She asked me if I had any idea who might have had access to my personal information. I told her I had some thoughts. I want to be honest about what was happening inside me during all of this. I wasn't panicking. I'm not someone who panics. But there was something worse than panic. There was the slow, spreading clarity, like a fog burning off and revealing a landscape you didn't want to see. I thought about Clint asking me about estate documents on the back porch. In October, I thought about the mail. I thought about Miriam standing at the stove telling me to stay upstairs and the calculation I'd seen on her face when I came down anyway. I thought about the $2,000 I'd lent her brother over the years and never seen again. I thought about the way she had slowly, gradually, over the course of several years, moved me to the edges of my own family. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just steadily. An inch at a time. I thought about how you can live next to something for so long that you stop seeing it. My attorney called me back that evening. I told him everything. He told me to document everything. He told me not to confront anyone yet. He told me to let the bank's investigation proceed and to be prepared to file a police report. "This is potentially criminal," he said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, these are federal matters if the amounts and methods meet the threshold." "What do I do about my wife?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "That," he said carefully, "depends on what the investigation finds." I slept in the guest room that night. I told Miriam I hadn't been sleeping well and didn't want to wake her. She looked at me for a moment and then said, "Was fine." She didn't ask what was keeping me up. I found the mail the next morning. I want to be specific about this because specifics matter. I got up early, before 6, and I walked out to the recycling bin at the side of the house. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just needed to move, needed to be outside with the cold air and my thoughts. The recycling bin had a plastic bag shoved down underneath some cardboard. Inside the bag were 6 envelopes, all addressed to me. My investment account statement from October, a letter from the Social Security Administration about annual adjustments, 2 credit card statements, a notice from my accountant's office, a letter from the county assessor regarding our property tax assessment for the following year. All of them had been opened. Carefully. The kind of careful that's deliberate, that uses a letter opener, that assumes you'll want to reseal them after. I put on a latex glove I'd gotten from the garage and I photographed every single one of them. I photographed the bag. I photographed the bin. I called my attorney from the driveway. "Don't touch anything else," he said. "I'll contact someone." The police came that afternoon. I had told Miriam I was having some plumbing looked at. She was upstairs. I stood in the driveway with 2 officers and walked them through everything. They took the bag and its contents into evidence. They took my statement. One of them asked me how long I'd been married. 31 years, I said. He wrote that down without any visible reaction, which I appreciated. My daughter called me that evening. She had heard from her uncle, Clint, that I had been acting strangely and that he was worried about my mental state. I asked her what specifically he had told her. She said he'd told her I had been hostile at dinner, that I had refused to cooperate with reasonable family conversations about estate planning, and that in his opinion I might be experiencing some cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. I was 63 years old. I had run a manufacturing plant for 18 years. I read every morning, I exercised. I had all my faculties, and then some. I took a breath. I told my daughter very calmly that I loved her, and that there were some things happening that she deserved to know about, but that I wanted to wait until I had more information before I explained everything. I told her I was not losing my mind. I told her that if she trusted me, I was asking her to hold off on making any judgments until she heard what I had to say. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad, are you okay?" "I am," I said. "I will be." Miriam found out about the police visit 3 days later. I'm not sure whether a neighbor mentioned it, whether one of the officers said something, or whether she found something on my phone she wasn't supposed to see. I don't know. What I know is that I was sitting in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning when she came downstairs and sat across from me, and her face was different. The calculation was gone. What replaced it was something raw. "What did you do?" she said. "I reported mail theft and identity fraud," I said, "to the people who are supposed to handle it. You called the police on your own family. Someone used my personal information to attempt a $14,000 wire transfer out of my account," I said. "Someone intercepted my mail for weeks to get that information. Those are crimes. I reported crimes." She stared at me. "Do you have any idea what you started?" "I think," I said slowly, "that I have some idea of what was already started, without my knowledge or consent." She left the table. She went upstairs. I heard her on the phone for a long time, her voice too low to make out words, just the urgent rhythm of someone managing a situation that was falling out of their control. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and waited. The investigation moved in ways I didn't always fully understand, but my attorney kept me informed. The bank confirmed that the person who had called to pass security verification had used information that was on the documents found in the recycling bag. Clint's phone records, obtained through proper legal channels, showed a call to the bank's customer service line on the date in question. His voice was identifiable enough that the bank's recorded call logs became significant. He hadn't done this alone. That much became clear. He had help understanding the accounts, understanding what documents to look for, understanding the processes involved. The investigation expanded. I had moved out by that point. Not dramatically. I didn't throw anything, didn't make any speeches. I packed 2 bags one Saturday while Miriam was at her book club, and I drove to a furnished apartment 2 towns over that my attorney had helped me find. I left a note on the kitchen counter that said I had retained legal counsel and that all further communication should go through my attorney's office. I had been in that apartment 4 days when my phone rang. It was Miriam. I almost didn't answer, but there was something, 31 years of something, that made me press the green button. "Please," she said. Her voice was different. The flatness was gone. "Please, I need to talk to you." "Talk to my attorney," I said. "He's been arrested," she said. "Clint. They took him this morning." Her breath caught. "They're saying it's federal. Wire fraud, identity theft. They're saying 5 to 10 years. His lawyer is saying 5 to 10 years. His lawyer is saying—" She stopped. "I didn't know it had gone that far. I didn't know he was going to." "Yes, you did," I said. Silence. "The mail didn't open itself," I said. "The investment statements didn't walk out of the envelope and sit in a bag in the recycling bin on their own. You knew what was in that house, Miriam. You knew what he was doing." "I thought it was just information," she said. "I thought he just wanted to look at what we had, to make sure I was protected, in case you—" I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't. "You asked me to stay upstairs," I said, "when he came to dinner. You wanted him in the house without me there." She didn't say anything. "I have to go," I said. "Please don't do this, please. 31 years. "Yes," I said. 31 years, I know." And I hung up. I sat in that apartment for a long time afterward. There was a window that faced west, and the late afternoon light came through it in a way I found unexpectedly comforting. I made a pot of coffee. I called my son. I called my daughter. I told them everything. The whole thing from the beginning, as clearly and as factually as I could. I did not editorialize. I did not ask them to choose sides. My son was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Dad," he finally said. "I know," I said. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there." My daughter came to the apartment that weekend with groceries and a casserole dish, and we sat at a small table, and she didn't say much, and neither did I. And it was the most comfortable I'd felt in longer than I could honestly remember. Clint was charged federally. The process moved slowly, the way these things do, but it moved. My attorney filed the necessary paperwork. The divorce proceedings began. People ask me sometimes, because I've told parts of this story to people I trust, how I feel. They expect me to say angry or devastated or lost, and I was all of those things, but underneath all of it there was something else that's harder to name. Relief, maybe. The kind that comes when a thing you've been almost seeing for years finally comes fully into focus, when you don't have to wonder anymore. I had spent a long time being patient, being reasonable, extending grace and goodwill and olive branches to a man who was quietly studying the layout of my finances. I had shrunk myself for the sake of keeping peace at a table where I should have always had a seat. I don't do that anymore. My apartment faces west, and the light is good in the afternoons. I read in the mornings. I have coffee with my daughter on Sundays. My grandson calls me on the phone sometimes just to tell me about things he's learned in school, and I listen to every single word. I'm 63 years old. I am not a man who gets sent to his room. I never was. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the phone call, not the police in the driveway, not even the bag of opened mail in the recycling bin. It's Miriam at the stove telling me to stay upstairs, and the way I stood there holding those groceries and said nothing for a few seconds too long. I've thought a lot about what those seconds cost me, and what they might have cost me if I'd kept staying quiet. What I know now, and I think I knew then, somewhere underneath the patience and the reasonableness I'd spent 31 years practicing, is that people who intend to do right by you don't ask you to disappear. They don't need you out of the room. They don't require your absence to feel comfortable in the house you built together. When someone asks you to make yourself smaller so that their version of things can run more smoothly, that request itself is the answer to every question you were too cautious to ask out loud. Clint didn't become who he was overnight. The fraud didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of being allowed to operate without consequence, years of borrowed money not repaid, of opinions delivered through a third party, of a man who learned that the boundaries in our home were soft enough to push through. I had extended grace in situations where I should have extended clarity. I had let things slide because I told myself I was being the bigger person. But patience without limits isn't virtue. It's just a different kind of surrender. And Miriam. I spent a long time not wanting to think too hard about what she knew and when she knew it. But the mail doesn't open itself. She understood what Clint needed that information for, at least in some version of it, even if she told herself a softer story about her own involvement. That's the thing about looking away from something. You don't get to claim innocence just because you never looked directly at it. Knowing and choosing not to know are closer together than most people want to admit. What I came to understand, sitting in that west-facing apartment with my coffee and my first quiet mornings in years, is that self-respect isn't a feeling. It's a series of decisions. It's coming downstairs when you're told to stay up. It's calling the bank back. It's walking to the recycling bin on a cold morning when something in your gut says to look. It's being willing to let a 31-year marriage be examined honestly, even when honesty is the most uncomfortable thing in the room. I'm not a perfect man. I was too slow to see what was happening around me. I gave people more benefit of the doubt than the evidence warranted. But I did not collapse. I did not accept the version of myself that Clint and eventually Miriam seemed to require. And when it mattered most, I was clear-headed enough to document, to call the right people, to let the process work. My daughter showed up with groceries and a casserole dish and sat with me in that small kitchen without needing to say very much. My grandson calls me on the phone to tell me what he learned in school. Those ordinary, reliable things are what's left when everything else gets stripped away. I'm 63 years old. I came down the stairs. I sat at my table. That's where I'm staying.